Mr. Narayanan, I also want to get each one of you to talk to us about what you see as the global challenges. Because at this point in time, while India is relatively better positioned, we are not decoupled from what's happening in the rest of the world. And the world is vulnerable, whether we talk about inflation, we talk about interest rates, we talk about energy, we talk about food security. As a CEO today, how are you mapping the risks, the known knowns, and the unknown unknowns as well?
I think it's a very good question, Shereen. I think one of the first tasks that I have as a CEO is to manage the environment, the consequences, and the risks that I face here domestically. And I think one of the things is that, and I've alluded to this before as well, I think the specter of inflation, especially food inflation, is still on us. We cannot wish it away, and we cannot assume that it's not going to be haunting us for a while. This clearly has implications in terms of price values, in terms of costs, in terms of incomes, expenditures, and all of that. Coupled with this, of course, the fact that we are a consumption-driven economy gives us a lot of hedge in terms of some of the global volatilities that we have, especially on things like fuel and other raw materials that we might tend to import over a period of time. But I think the important issue for us is really to use the opportunity that we have today of digitally transforming our businesses across the value chain. And I think there is so much of money to be unlocked in the value chain of organizations, be it logistics, be it procurement, be it quality management, be it manufacturing conversion, be it efficiencies in channel management, consumer management, etc. There is a huge unlock that is still available to organizations here. Again, taking the point of Sandeep on technology arbitrages and on talent arbitrages. So really for me, the agenda is really full with all the opportunities that I can unlock locally, and also with the overall consumer sentiment being reasonably positive. I think there is a full task here to be done, rather than getting myself worried unduly about, I like the war to end one day, but whether that is going to have a direct impact on me today. Honestly, it is more what I do in the organization and how the Indian environment treats me that is more important than what's happening globally.
Oh, absolutely. You can only control what you can control at this point in time. But Mr. Ekholm, I want to understand from you the global perspective as well. Mr. Narayanan spoke about the war in Europe, and that continues now into its second year. Inflation, interest rates, all of that has dented consumer sentiment. All of that has dented the business environment and business confidence as well. What are you hearing from your customers outside of India at this point in time? And how are you dealing with building out a pipeline in this era of uncertainty?
I mean, I will be honest to say I'm not a macroeconomist, I'm an engineer, so I provide that. But we talk to customers, and what's quite clear is the US economy, and really, I mean, there are a couple of challenges that we could be afraid of. But if you start on the economic part, the US is actually quite strong, seems to be doing fine. We hear, temporary slowdown is what we see among our customers, but the fundamental economy is in good shape. Or has a good demand profile. Europe, on the other hand, is a big question mark. And of course it's related to the war in Ukraine that have dented the consumer sentiment, but it's also very high inflation, very high food inflation, very high inflation on cost of living, that's actually removing a lot of consumer, income from the market. So I think Europe is a big question mark where it's heading. And today, if we look on the digital world, Europe is not the role model. Europe is not building out the digital infrastructure, etc. So I see big concerns about Europe when we talk to our customers. And that to me is worrisome. We're a European company. We still have a European base. So for us, Europe is important. But I would also say that I do think technology is actually one of the key solutions for the future. The reason why the US is performing so well is, of course, on the back of, even though we read about job losses in the tech sector, the reality is most of the people that lose the job at one company are re-employed in another one very quickly. Yeah. Because the value of technology is so big. And it's going to be part of the solution here. And I see, when I look out, digitalization of enterprises and society is just at the beginning. We're not seeing that run its runway yet. As we make manufacturing more efficient, we make it consume less energy, we make supply chains more efficient, consume less energy. That's going to be part of what solves the general economic picture, helps fight inflation, helps increase accessibility. So I'm actually a big believer that, yes, it may look a little bit dark right now with geopolitics, the economy, etc., but technology is going to be part of the solution for addressing these really big challenges.
Absolutely. It could provide that buffer that we've all spoken of and is much needed at this point in time. Mr. Lundmark, I want to understand from you and get your context on the global environment as well. You've been on a whirlwind whistle-stop tour around the world, from the US to Europe and, of course, now here in India. What are the signals that you're picking up in terms of how long this road of uncertainty is likely to be? Are clients holding back on spending in other parts of the world at this point in time?
Despite the economic uncertainty, we are not seeing any huge cuts in spending. There have been cases here and there, but in the big picture, I'm optimistic. I'm also an engineer. I'm not an economist, so that makes us two engineers in the panel and three engineers.
What about you, Mr. Narayanan? Economics. Okay, so we've got three engineers and an economist.
So as one of the three engineers, I'm looking at this from the technology potential point of view, and the key reason why I'm optimistic in the big picture is that only about 30% of the world economy is digitalized compared to what the full potential is. And as we all know, which was already mentioned here, I mean, the technology we are providing is a central part of the answer to pretty much all key problems that the world is facing. Battling climate change, one key element in that is that we need to digitalize the whole energy system. It's very much also a communications connectivity challenge when we balance demand and supply in an energy system that has more and more weather-dependent renewables. You can mention almost any sector of the industry, and yes, we have only scratched the surface in transport.
Yeah, wrap by asking each one of you to take us through what the plans are in terms of spends on your own digital transformation. A lot has already been done, but what more and where do you intend to put the money to work at this point in time, since you are also talking about how this can be potentially a lever to mitigate some of the risks we spoke of?
Sure, I think one thing is very clear, Shereen, for Nestlé, India is important and will always remain important. So if you look at our overall investments in this country, we have talked in the region of about 5,000 crores in the next 3 years. We spent 8,000 crores in 60 years. We're going to spend 5,000 crores in 3 years. We're looking at our places for our 10th factory, maybe our 11th factory. So there is a lot of positivism and born out of performance. This is not a let's hope for the best. This is based on performance of the organization and of the consumer. Really, 3 areas is where we will be putting our monies on the digital part. Number 1 is on the consumer. I think the consumer piece is absolutely exploding. I must confess, Shereen, I don't understand 90% of that technology, but I'm still given to believe. I've asked them simple questions on what does it do to the consumer. And really, the whole, whether it is everyday artificial intelligence or whether it is a metaverse or whether it is the super app that people are talking about, I think the consumer end is really very, very exciting for us. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the sourcing end, and I think it was alluded to earlier in terms of what can be done in the agricultural sector. One of the big things for me, the dream for me, is that every single spice that I use, every grain of wheat that I use, if I'm able to trace it back to a farm for a consumer and say, this is the assurance that I'm able to give you of the quality and veracity of what I'm giving you, not just as a brand name Nestle, but in terms of ingredients, I think it will be a big deal. That can happen, Shereen, only with digital. There's no other way in which, and I can't have people counting the chilies and the mustard seeds from where they come and how they go. So that's the second piece. The third piece, I think, the company globally and locally is wedded to sustainability. Sustainability involves not just things like water conservation, plastics, and dairy farming, but also involves enormous amounts of technological inputs in areas of efficiencies, effectiveness, and cost management. All of this we are seeing now increasingly as a company becoming more digitally oriented. So these three areas would really be the prime focus.
Sandeep, Naik, Mr. Lundmark, Mr. Ekholm, and Suresh Narayanan, thank you very, very much for joining us here, for sharing your thoughts and your insights on what the road ahead looks like.
Whenever I had ice cream,